Welcome to RCAM. I'm your host, Ryan, and thank you for tuning in today. So today I am joined by Pomps. How are you doing today, man?
Good. How you doing, Ryan? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing great, dude. I just wanted to just give you a chance to tell my audience a little bit about yourself. We're gonna share a little bit about your story and kind of what God has done in your life. You shared a little bit with me, and it's pretty profound. And I'm really excited to get into this talk with you, man.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we kind of met obviously through mostly X, formerly known as Twitter, and it's been great just to kind of converse with you there and just share thoughts and ideas. And as big thing I see is just a need and the lack of people really willing to share not just the gospel, but even just how God's like trying to change them purposely, right? That's kind of not just sharing the gospel that Jesus wanted us to proclaim, but even hearing how Paul talks about it in his letters, how Peter talks about it, the transformation that undergoes us. And so I'm just excited to have the opportunity to share my story, ultimately God's story, and just what He's done, because it's something that hopefully will resonate with a few people. And I gave you a preview earlier, but excited to kind of dive into it and share and just talk about that transformation, man, new creations and all that.
Yeah, we met through combating the red pill together, man. So they are a special group on Twitter, man. They
Oh
need the
yeah.
gospel desperately.
Oh yeah, and I think it's because it's a materialistic view. It's a worldview of kind of like I deserve this or we should get that for this. It's a tit for tat. It's a if this then that, very like logical, somewhat rational view from a materialistic point. But the issue with it, it's all about self-service, right? It's all self-serving, and it lacks kind of the point of the gospel. And I think that's one thing people forget is like, yes, I'm definitely in the camp of like, men are leaders, we have authority, all that good stuff, but we're also meant to serve, serve one another, serve our families, serve our communities. And I think that's the part people forget. It's not even just they try to couch it as toss it into the feminist camp of this is, servant leadership is like, that's a feminist idea. It's not. It's actually a lot. It's very true from the gospels.
Yeah.
God, Jesus talks about he came not to be served, but to serve. He, actually washes the disciples' feet, including Judas's feet. It's obviously a very military driven and kind of in the first responder community. We do that a lot when it comes to, leaders eat last, pretty famous book.
Yeah.
So our very concept, Simon Sinek wrote a book about that. And, it's obviously, I don't think he's a Christian by any means, but obviously sees the truth in how leadership.
He's got a lot
Uh,
of good, like, actual, like,
mhm.
Christian principles in some of his work. I
Yeah.
read some of it. Start with Why, I think
Yeah,
I
and I
read.
don't know if he's a Christian proper, or I
Hmm.
don't know his details, but it's cool to see that even he can recognize the truth in the idea of service through leadership. And so, to your point, I think that's kind of how we first met for sure, and kind of highlighting the virtues and the joys of what it means to actually love and love well when it comes to God, and then family, and having kids and a wife, like we were just talking about a little bit earlier. So it's been great. It's been cool, and it's been cool to see the journey you've been on. I know you got deplatformed and even lost your initial X, and then
Yeah.
came back, and it's been cool to see you regrow and kind of build your content out again.
Yeah, dude, that was very frustrating. I'm not gonna lie. Low moment for me when I lost my Twitter. I think I got up to like three. It's still not a lot, but you spend years building this platform and then they just arbitrarily rip it away from you. It's just like, dang, man, that sucks, man. They just totally sucked the wind out of my sails. But I have been rebuilding, and I've been a little bit more reserved with how I interact on Twitter, just because now I know like that's not a safe platform to say everything I gotta say. Rumble's been really good to me, so I really appreciate the folks here at Rumble. They've been awesome. Um, but yeah, I agree that Jesus like set this example of what it means to be masculine. He also set the example for marriage too, which a lot of people underscore. I say if your version or vision of masculinity or marriage doesn't align with God's vision for masculinity and marriage, you're probably not as alpha as you think you are. If you're not
Yeah,
following the alpha and the omega.
exactly. And I think too that's, and I know we'll get into it. And I think that's kind of why for me, when I see like the red pill community, I get it. I get the anger, I get the frustration that a lot of those guys have. I easily could probably have been in that camp. I have every kind of shared with you early on, before we met tonight. But like, yeah, like I have every excuse in the book to kind of join that crowd. But I see the folly of it, and I see the joy of what you know. I don't even want to call it just true masculinity, just what it actually means to be masculine,
Hmm.
in especially a biblical or Christian sense. Um, and so I'm just like, again, that goes back more to the testimony of like, just God in his hand, like over my life and seeing him um, do what he's done.
Yeah, man. So yeah, I'm curious, dude. I'd love to hear your story, and I'm sure my audience does. So why don't you, I guess, start from the beginning? What kind of led you through this faith journey, and how did you end up here?
Yeah, thank you. So kind of it, like I said, from the on the outside, like, everything on paper. If you're doing like a scouting report, trying to recruit for college or the pros or whatever, like everything on paper, kind of the deck was stacked against me, if you will. If you want to kind of view it in those terms, I'm an only child, come from a single mom. At best, grew up lower middle class, but we were just barely above the poverty line, most likely. And one of the things that I can kind of like when I reflect back and see is the wisdom that God gave my mom. And one of the things she always used to say, she kind of had this like God given wisdom in the sense that, so despite that situation, she really protected me from a lot, from like the hurt that my biological dad could have caused me. When he wasn't showing up, when he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do, she just kind of cut him out. But it wasn't a two-way cutout. Like she always left the door open for me. She closed it for him. But very much always resonated. Kind of, we're talking about like I love film. I'm a photographer as well. But uh, one of the I grew up kind of loving media, and Fresh was in that age group that got to watch like Fresh Prince of Bel Air and all that. And I always resonated that episode when Will's dad comes in, and they kind of get bonded again, and then his dad just abruptly leaves, and he's like, why doesn't he want me anymore? And I kind of wrestled with a lot of that, but thankfully, because I had a mom that really cared and surrounded me with like good Christian men, got me in the church, gave me the foundation to not let that scar me as much as it could have. And so really from her, the whole like, God, give, I forget exactly how it goes in the Old Testament, but it's like the whole like raise your children up in the way they ought to go and they will not depart from that
Yeah.
path. That was really true, as and even as much as I tried to depart on my own, as I kind of got into my college years, and it's like, I can figure out life on my own. I can do this on my own. I got that freedom despite having grown up in the church. She really had that wisdom that gave me the grounding I needed to kind of protect me even from myself of wanting to go astray when those opportunities presented itself.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate uh without growing up with a dad, because that was kind of, not that my dad wasn't there. He was, him and my mom separated when we were young, and I saw him, every other weekend or something. Then we moved upstate and it was a lot less. It was primarily my mother raising us, and he would support us financially, which he always did, and it's not like we couldn't see him, but it just, when he's 2 hours away, it makes that a lot more difficult and a lot more frequent. And my mom she could not handle me and my brothers. We were much, and I'll admit it. We were a lot on her, but morally, like her character, she was, a woman of character, worked really hard, and was definitely influential in me becoming the man that I am today. Um, and I ultimately got a chance to kind of reconcile things with my dad, which was great because it was needed. But in his absence, I had to look to other men in my life to kind of help me learn and navigate what it means to be a man, because your mom can only bring you so far. There is a
Mhm.
point where you have to kind of either figure it out on your own, or seek it out from other men to understand what it means, or turn to your faith where you can learn from, Jesus.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that's kind of what she recognized and did, and so she got me grounded in the church. I played sports my whole life. She made sure I was in sports. She made sure I was around good, coaches, especially ones that had faith when possible, and played hockey, basketball, lacrosse. Got to play lacrosse all the way through college, which was great. And so that's kind of like the beginning of my story. It's like I have all these excuses, but one thing that God really did was gave me a mom that had the wisdom that as soon as she found out she was pregnant, she was like, you know what, I probably need to get back to church and figure out how to raise this kid right. That when I was growing up, she really did the things she needed to do. Like she would tell my grandma she would have to spank me. She's like, one day this kid's going to be bigger and stronger than I am, and if he doesn't respect me now, he's not going to respect me later. So she did all the hard stuff that she needed to do. So that's kind of like really the first part. When I look back on my life, even now, I can see like God just really gave me uh, a woman in my life, my mom, that could really understand how to raise me well, and realize that she could only go so far, and got me into the church, got me into areas where I was going to be surrounded by other good good men. So it's kind of like the foundations. And then really when I get into like my college, post college, and grad years, that's where I'm like the typical folly of I'm not a big advocate for college unless you're kind of doing a professional degree, to be honest. But we can always get into that in a different day. But I think part of it is
Yeah,
because
I
you
totally
kind of
get
have
what
that
you're talking about.
unrestricted freedom in a way that even if you're grounded well, like I went to a Christian university, but even then it's like kind of Christian in name only.
Yeah, I
So
when I was dating my wife, I had gotten an opportunity to go to SUNY Oswego and some of these other schools in New York that were really big, and they were well-known party schools. And I was like, and then I had an opportunity to go to this college out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Christian University. And I was like, man, I feel like if I go to that the New York school, it's going to be bad news bears for me, man. I'm just kind of coming out of that wild lifestyle, and to be immersed in it, I don't think it's going to be good for my faith. So or my relationship, and I really love my wife. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the Christian school, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
yeah, and even though it was kind of like Christian name only, because not everyone there is like at the same level of faith. It still was like kind of like a godsend because that was like the only university I actually got into. It's still a prestigious university, but it wasn't like I was trying to get into some like the bigger state schools, and even though I had like the resume to do it, I just for whatever reason, and I think again that's kind of God making decisions in my life super easy, which I've always appreciated.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so from like kind of that time, I was kind of just living my life on my terms, trying to do my thing, trying to, I can do this. Like, hey, God, I appreciate the help, but I'm smart enough to figure it out, and just made a lot of bad choices when it came to like dating and relationships. That's another reason I think like we connected so much on the red pill stuff is that like, it's not all their fault. Like, there was a lot of red flags that I just ignored because she was hot, like because whatever reasons that I would give to wave away whatever red flags I was seeing, right? And then obviously none of those women are the ones I'm married to today, so that proves like I should have been listening all along to those red flags. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of ownership I think people need to take on themselves. It's obviously Jocko. I know it kind of feels overplayed now, but his book Extreme Ownership is about that, like that actually recognizing what are you doing, what contribution are you actually in control of, and how do you manage that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I was kind of doing my own life, and like kind of the fast forward to like to the main bits now is I have this foundation, but I'm like, what, I'm smart enough, I can do it on my own. And I kind of get in trouble with the law, and I have no problem sharing that because again, God redeems that stuff. But I was hanging out with some of my coaching buddies. I went to started coaching lacrosse too after work, which is always really fun. And on the weekend, this is off season, so this is like not even like remotely close to the coaching season at all, but or the lacrosse season. But we go to a bar, and we're just hanging out, drinking, and then we just hung out there too long, drank too much too fast, and the long story short of that, I just fell asleep in my car, but I used to drive a manual transmission, and then I must have disengaged it. So next thing I know, I'm waking up and there's lights all around me. There's a cop knocking on my window, and next thing I know, I'm like arrested for DUI.
Oh, dang.
And so I get myself in trouble. So now I'm like, okay, so I got to fight this, and I'm able to through actually one of the parents that knows me really well. He was a lawyer, so he helped me out. But it's a process, and it's not a short process. And then the year before, my mom got diagnosed with cancer, and my whole life grew up in apartments. The last apartment we lived in one apartment for almost 20 years, something like that, something crazy. And it's just my mom was ever never able to kind of really get the financial stuff she needed to buy a house. And I kid you not, like the year she was going to do it, she kind of had all this stuff saved. She had everything she needed to do to buy a house. That's the year she got diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's this like 2 year period where it's just like, gut punch, pretty much my only family, my mom gets diagnosed with cancer. They give her a year to live. I get myself into trouble by making bad decisions and letting other people make decisions for me because I'm inebriated. And so like now I'm just kind of frustrated. I'm mad at God, even though like again at the time I didn't recognize that I put myself in that position, but I was mad at God for my mom thing. I was mad at God for how could you let me get in trouble, all this stuff. And so I just kind of had this unresolved anger, and in the fear, especially of my mom having cancer, I kind of like hid in the relationship I was in, and it was just like that for like I want to say like 3 years. So like for the first 3 years that my mom had cancer, and like the first 2 years into this like lawsuit that I was having to fight
Are you
with the
still
state.
at this point drinking too?
No, no, I stopped after the DUI got me cleared up, so I didn't like.
That's
I
good,
never
man.
like. I never was like any like had any problems with drinking. It was just like that one night, just like kind of. But again, like it only takes one time to make a
Oh
mistake.
yeah, man. There are nights like there was a night actually just recently, like I always wondered to like how I got home because I was that and it was scary, bro.
Hmm.
You one minute you're at a party and then the next minute you wake up, you're in your bed having no idea how you got there. You know, and I found out that my buddy, actually like last year, he was the one that drove me home. I was like, he's like, yeah, you don't remember that? No, I had no idea. That's scary, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely cut
Uh,
heavy drinking out of my life for sure.
yeah. So now, like just do it like when like if we're like at sporting events or anything like, but it's
Yeah.
all super casual, and it's not even a big part just because I relatively try to do lift a lot, eat relatively healthy, just protein and all the good stuff. But yeah, so like I'm at this point in my life where I'm just frustrated, and then that's probably like 20. That's 2013, 2014. So 2016. This is like year four now, and I'm kind of like dealing with it. My mom's just like, just go with me to church, and so I'm kind of getting back into the church life, like going with her just because it's my mom. She's asking me to go. She's got cancer. How can I say no? And every time I'm sitting in the pews, I just feel like this, this piercing of my heart. Like something's like every time the sermon, it feels like the sermon's about like me and like disobedience or coming back or like God loves you, all that good stuff. Not to oversimplify it, but it just those sermons just really always felt every time was just like right through the heart.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, I gotta get out of here. As soon as like sermon was over and we could go, I was excited to leave. Um,
Yeah, that conviction, man, comes over you as you're sitting in the pews and you're hearing, something that's specific to you. Oh, hold on one second. My daughter.
I love it. Yeah, and so the final kind of like the blow comes in 2016 when I get fired kind of unjustly from my job, and it was one of those like I when my mom got cancer, I was the one that had to tell her, and I remember I told her like, hey, God's got this. I didn't really like know what that meant. I believed in that particular sentence. I didn't know like if I really believed God would do it though, but I believed that He did have her, but I wasn't sure like what that really meant. Um, and then when I got fired, I remember there's like a real big piece. It's like, okay, whatever, I'll figure it out. Like, and even eventually later, the CEO would tell me like, that was a mistake. We shouldn't have done that. But I was one of those moments where it's like, I don't think I got fired. And I say unjustly, not because it's like I'm bitter or want to say that I didn't deserve it, because I know I didn't. But I think it was because actually God was removing me from that job, so I'd have to take a new job and move to a whole different city.
Yeah, this is resonating a lot with me because a very similar situation with me. I got let go from my job. First time I ever got fired in my life, and it was from
Mhm.
ministry, like my dream job. So I get that, dude.
Yeah, and so there's like, um, I'm fired. I'm like, okay, like I look at my bank account. I look at how much, like how like I need how fast I need to find a job, and I realize that if I don't get a job by the end of the year, I'm literally gonna have $0 in my bank account, like zero. Like, and I got student loans still. I got other bills, car bills, rent, all this stuff. I'm in a relationship at the time, and one of the guys I had met over the course of the last previous like maybe like 4 or 5 years. We had been in a startup together. We had he was a man of faith, really strong faith, and I was like, hey man, I need help trying to interview for jobs because I don't know how to answer like, hey, why are you like why are you leaving your current job? And it's like I don't know how to say I got fired, but kind of point out that it's not my fault, it was them, but not sound like whiny. And so we're kind of doing all these like we're kind of hanging out, grabbing lunch or dinner at times, and like walking through like strategies and how to like develop that answer and do it well and interview well and just kind of get back on my feet. And at one point, he realizes that there's more to like what's going on than just trying to find a job. It's more than just uh, I'm upset because I might not have money by the end of the year. So he's like, hey man, what's really going on? And like, we're close, like, we're friends, but we're like drinking buddies. We're not like, you know, tell each other secrets or like, the desires of our hearts.
Yeah.
And he's like, you seem like angry. I'm like, I'm not angry. What are you talking about? So he kind of cracks me and I start talking and we kind of get to the fact that I'm angry at God that somehow, I'm gonna have like no money at the end of the year. And somehow I've been dealing with this like lawsuit for the last like 3 years. The fact that my mom has cancer, like everything just seems like completely unfair. And we go through like a long conversation, and we kind of pray at the end of it. And I realize how much just how angry I am at God. And it was just such a just realizing how angry I was at God was just a huge revelation. It's like I didn't know it at the time that I was angry at him. But that conversation with him, like just it's kind of like when you kind of confess your sins,
Yeah.
right? I'm not Catholic, but I know that, but it does talk about that, like, confess your sins to one another. And it was just like I finally confessed this big sin that was just like the undertow of this like tide of, of myself. And it was really fascinating. Like once I said that, I realized like what had been wrong the last at least 3 or 4 years. And so at one night, I'm like later that week, I'm just like up, just on the floor of my apartment at 3 a.m., just scrolling LinkedIn, just hitting apply, quick apply to anything. I'm just like, got to get a job. You have to have a job to get a job type thing. So I'll take anything at this point. I'll do
Yeah.
whatever. And I just remember that I'm laying there at 3 a.m. and I'm applying to whatever, trying to get anything. And I was like, God, I just need you. It was kind of like really one of those like rock bottom, like, I'm it's kind of like the prodigal son thing where you just like I'll sleep with the pigs, and as long as I can have like the scraps at my father's table, like I'll whatever you need me to do, like I'll do it. And it was just like it was a humbling moment of just realizing how much I'm dependent on him, how much like I really need him in my life. And so I want to say within like 2 weeks I finally get a response, and I applied to hundreds of jobs at this point. No
Yeah,
response.
dude. Freaking LinkedIn, bro. Don't get me started on LinkedIn because you
Exactly.
could
And so
apply to
I've applied to
dozens of
hundreds of.
jobs and get nowhere, nothing. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, and so I finally get a response. They're like, I go through the interview process, do well, and they're like, when can you start? And I'm like, now, just tell me when. And so I get a job, and it's in a different city, and so I'm having to commute for like 3 months. But the buddy that helped me, the startup is expanding to that city, and so he and I were able to actually like continue our friendship and go deeper. So we were going to try and be roommates, but he ended up signing a lease before we kind of confirmed if I was going to move there for sure. But it was kind of great because then I had my own place, he had his own place, and it really pulled me away. Even though it took me away from my mom and the church I was going to with her, it also pulled me away from the relationship I was in. It wasn't a bad relationship, and like she was a bad girl. We just weren't right for each other. So it pulled me away from that. Again, the friend group I had, great people, good drinking buddies, but they weren't like the friend group that was going to help me grow, especially in
Yeah.
my faith, let alone in anything else. So it pulled me away from that. So it's me and my buddy. We're in a new city together, and like we're doing everything. We're climbing. He's a musician, so in college he used to do these like live music shows, and so we started doing live music shows, and I help stream them, and we do like YouTube concert series,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
we get local artists, we get like local sponsorships, which is great, like ice cream companies, like wine companies, like it's really cool. And the whole time too, we're starting to. I'm going to church with him, and we're having conversations. And there's one evening, like he used to have this rooftop patio, and we used to do these rooftop live music shows together. And one evening after one of the shows, we're sitting there having some whiskey together and just talking. And I told him, like, you know what, like I realized like I always was looking for a relationship. I was always looking for a girlfriend, even ever since I was like pretty much in elementary school. And I had just maybe like a month or two ago had broken up with the girl that I was with in the other city. And I was like, I just realized that like one, I needed God first, and then two, that I needed brotherhood first. And that was kind of like where two, I think, when I see like the red pill community, when I see like the manosphere, when I see these guys that are angry at the world, I get it. Again, I've said like, even with the story I've shared, hopefully people can see that I have a lot of the same excuses or could fall into those same traps. But because I had a brother in Christ that came and like was willing to probe and go deeper, even though we weren't friends yet, even though we weren't or that close of a friends yet, because I had a brother that was willing to do that. It changed my life.
Yeah, man, we can never underestimate too like the strength that comes in like a actual spiritual friendship, iron sharpens iron. It's really really instrumental. Last year what did it? I did this obviously I went to school. I studied theology, like I've been in the Bible. I know the Bible and there's this course called Every Man a Warrior that my church was, wanted me to go through. And I just did not want to do it, bro. I'm like, oh, another Bible study. Like, what are they going to tell me that I don't know, And I ended up, my wife's like, "Oh, Ryan, you could, make some friends or whatever, get to know some people." I'm like, "All right, whatever. I'll give it a shot." I ended up doing it, and it was actually like, super transformative for me. Even though like the lessons were just basic, ABCs of Christianity, I actually formed like a really tight bond with these guys, man. And now they're like my brothers, man. We're doing Bible study outside. The group has been long over, and we've been doing Bible study together for
Mhm.
months, and just sharpening one another, and it's been a blessing. So I think a lot of men underestimate the need for that in their life, but there is a definite need for that. We're stronger together for sure.
Yeah, and it was crazy because I have this relationship with this great guy, and we're going playing ultimate frisbee. Like I said, we're climbing, we're doing these music shows, we're hanging out, um, and especially like as a brother in Christ, it was just really great to kind of have this foundation that wasn't based in like an identity in like a relationship with a girl or even like my relationship with him as a brother, but it was like we were building something, a foundation on solid ground, right,
Yeah.
of faith, and we were pointing each other to that every time, like through church, through just conversations we'd be having during the week. And even when I started to like, when I was like, okay, like we have this church that we're going to, but it doesn't have small groups yet. I kind of want to get plugged into a small group. Um, so I'm trying to find a small group. And one day we're at the park. We're doing our normal Saturday morning thing. He has some work to get done, so I had picked him up. So I dropped him off back home. I was like, I'm gonna go back to the park and see if anyone's doing some volleyball because I was in a competitive sand volleyball league in my previous city. And so I go, and there's like a really competitive group. There's like a bunch of pro-am guys. I was like, okay, I'm not looking to do that intense. There was a group of like a bunch of other people, like not very good, but I was like, yeah, I'll play with them. I just want to have fun. I'm not even trying to do much. Well, it turns out that's the small group of the church I go to now, but it was crazy because it was just like everything I was looking for. And so I started talking to them. Um, and it's just like everything I was looking for. It was just like a great group of people, like kind of like people my age, like just meeting on Tuesday nights. And I'm able to start getting plugged in. And so during this time, I'm like, been rediscovering my faith, like really diving into it, like actually listening to like not just the sermons I'm going to on Sunday, but listening to like other sermons, finding other good, like, pastors and their sermons. We're doing a lot of like reading, not just the Bible, but even like other like good books as well. And it's just like a time of just like great spiritual growth. And so obviously my mom's still dealing with the cancer stuff. I still have this lawsuit hanging over my head, but these other areas are starting to change. Like my friend group is actually like people that I would consider like what we've been saying brothers. Like not just my buddy, but this other friends I've been making through like the small group now, through work, and I'm just seeing this transformation of like again, like I said, the people my previous friends weren't like bad people or anything, but they just weren't the ones that were helping me grow in the way that I'm seeing now. I'm not There was like actually fruit coming from people pouring into me now, which was like just like really cool. And so finally I'm at the finish line with this lawsuit. It's either they're gonna dismiss the case or I'm gonna get charged and have to do the whole breathalyzer thing in the car to start your car. And my lawyer's like, well, what do you want to do? Like, you can make a deal and just do it. Like, it's a year, or you can try and see if we can get it dismissed. I was like, just get dismissed because I didn't drive. If I had driven, it was like a ticky tack foul. But I was like, I don't really like. I want to like in the back of my head, I'm like, I want to start dating again. I actually want to find like uh, a wife and like actually do these things that I'm like reading about and learning. And so I'm sitting in the court, and you have like zero power. There's not much you can do, especially in these situations. You kind of just talk to your lawyer, and then they go do their thing, and you just have to sit on the sideline and see what happens. It's like the ultimate, like you have no control. You're, in my case, like, you know what? I'm praying. It's like, God, like, honestly, whether I get the thing removed, whether this gets dismissed, or I get convicted of this, I know either way I'm going to celebrate you because I know that you got this either way. And uh, it actually takes two more times before they actually ultimately dismiss it. But it was really just like, oh my gosh, like we're getting delayed again. We get delayed another month, and then we get delayed another month, and it's kind of getting frustrating. But like, hey, God, I trust you in this process. Ultimately, it gets dismissed, and I remember the whole drive back from my previous city where I'm having to show up still to
That's
go to court,
awesome.
driving back to my new city, and the whole way I just like was cheering him, just praising him. And there's this concept called Ebenezer's, like these like little stone towers you build, and the idea behind them is to kind of remember what God's done for you. To oversimplify exactly what they're for, but it's just a reminder, like what God's done for you. And I kind of started building these from that day. I started building these mental Ebenezer's to remember that, uh, who God is and who He was in, or who He is in my life. Because you read, like, especially if you read, like, Exodus and the Book of Kings and the Book of Samuel, there are times you're like, how do they forget so quickly who God is when they prosper them, right? You read about,
Yeah,
like,
dude, it's one
Solomon.
of the most frustrating things in the Bible, but it's also one of the most frustrating things about humanity in general, because it's like we think we're divorced from it, but we're no
Yeah,
different, man. It's like, we very well may have been the Israelites who just saw the Red Sea parted, and then we're, crying about, how our water is bitter, or we're gonna starve or whatever.
we're gonna
That's
wish for
us, man.
slavery again. Yeah, and I remember thinking, like, I don't want to fall into that trap, and obviously I still do, but that's like why these, like, mental Ebenezer's are so important for me. And so that was like my very first one I really truly built to remember, like, okay, here was a moment in time where, like, I really did believe, like, no matter what happened, I was going to trust him, but he did show up
Yeah,
in a way that
one.
I didn't deserve at all. Like, because again, like, I did, I was drunk, I was in my car, and even though I wasn't technically driving, I still deserved to be punished. But he had mercy on me by in grace by letting that get dismissed, so I could actually pursue dating. Because that I love driving. Like I said, I used to drive a manual transmission. I love cars, and of course I'm going to, like, pick up the girl. I'm going to open the door, do all those things.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, having this in the car, like trying to sneak and then turn the key would be like embarrassing. Oops.
You're good.
So go ahead. Sorry, you're going to say
Yeah,
something?
yeah, no, I just think of this Ebenezer concept. So I don't know if you see, like, right up over there, I have the zeets hanging down off the
Hmm.
cross. I wear them actually, and I kind of always thought, like, you see primarily Jewish people wearing them, and it's a commandment in the Bible. God says, to put these on, tie these on, and it's like a reminder, though. It's like an everyday reminder that he's built in so that they don't forget, which is crazy because they had that. Israel had that, and they still forgot. They still forgot. It's nuts.
Yeah, and I think it's like super, and that's like kind of one of my biggest things I try to encourage people to do is to build those to not forget. Because again, that wasn't like the end of my struggles, but it was the showing that, like, when I actually started praying to God, that there was actually fruit to be had. Um, and so, like, and it was just like, and all that just changed everything. It was just like a moment that really showed me, like, the truth of the gospel, that you know when it talks about height, there's no depth that you can go, or height that you can go, then I won't be with you. When at the end of Matthew, he's like, I'm going to be with you to the end of the age. And I was like, okay, like, there's something there. There's something to that that's true. And in this moment where I had to relinquish control, like, years ago, of my life and my decision making, because I chose to drink. And now, like, the last, like, 4 or 5 years at this point, this was in control of somebody else, and yet you had mercy on me, and I'll always be grateful for that. And so this started a journey, and like I said, it wasn't like the end of anything, right? It's just the start. And so, kind of like the next big thing, I kind of like now that I kind of established this concept of Ebenezer. So the next big one was, like, relationships. So, okay, like, I beat this thing. It's over. It's dismissed. My driving record's clean. I don't have to worry about it anymore. I don't have to worry about when someone pulls a background check on me if I get a job. Are they going to see it? Are they going to ask about it?
Yeah, and you get those nice insurance rates now, right, bro?
Yeah, I get back to having to pay, like, normal insurance rates. So, um, and again, and this is, like, I think, kind of applicable, especially, like, as we kind of talked a little bit earlier about the red pill community. I'm kind of doing everything right. I'm going to church. I'm in the Word. I'm praying every day. I'm doing all the Christian-y things that you're supposed to do, right? Not because I'm supposed to do them because I generally want to, but I'm doing, like, from the outside looking in, like, I'm doing what you're supposed to do. So I meet this woman, um, also from the small group, and it's like, she's cute. Let's start talking. So we start talking. We go on a few dates, and everything's going well. Everything feels like it's progressing as it should. You're like, it's like very formally, like, I'm doing A, and I'm doing B, I'm doing C. Therefore, I should get outcome whatever I think it should be, right? And so maybe like a month and a half in, she's like, I really have other stuff I need to focus on. I don't think I can do this right now. And I'm like, okay, cool. I get it. Do your thing. All good. And so I go home and I'm just frustrated now, because it's like, okay, like, God, what's going on? Like, I'm doing all I'm supposed to do. Like, I prayed about everything. Before every date, I'm praying. Like, like, she's someone that goes to church. I go to church. Like, she's Christian. I'm Christian. Like, I'm doing the equation. Why am I not getting what I want? I talked to my buddy. I talked to my mom, and to simplify their advice, but I don't want to minimize what they were encouraging me. And But they both told me like, listen, you just gotta trust God, right? And again, it's easy to say, and in those moments, you definitely don't want to hear it. It's not. It doesn't always feel as helpful. They didn't say it as simply and as unhelpful as that. They were very encouraging, but that's essentially what they're saying. And so I'm frustrated. I'm in bed. Like it's a very similar despondent feeling. It's like, maybe like I wasted my 20s and I didn't like date well. And maybe I'm just going to be single and I'm not going to be able to have this thing. And I'm only like 31 at the time. And I was like, you know what? God, I trust you in this. Like you've shown me your faithfulness and everywhere else, especially where I was unfaithful. Um, I'm thinking back to that first Ebenezer. I'm like, okay, I trust you. And if I have to stay single, it's all good because I have my brothers. Like I have these guys from my small group. I have my buddy that's been there with me since I moved to the new city. Like it's all going to be good. And if that's like the relationship I get to have, like what, I'm happy with that because these have been so fruitful. I'm not gonna whine for more when I have plenty right now. Right? It's kind of like the whole manna from heaven. Like just take what you need.
Yeah.
Don't worry about tomorrow. And so again, kind of like the 2 week time frame. 2 weeks later, our small group does this camping trip, and we're just let's go camping and hang out. Everyone get to know each other. So I go and I volunteer to do the coffee the next morning, and so I'm preparing the coffee, and I have my dog with me, and this girl. She sees my dog and wants to talk, and so we're talking. And I had noticed her a few times previously in the small
Guys
group.
underestimate the power of dogs, man. It's
Yeah,
listen, fellas, if you're looking to date, if you're looking to meet somebody, have a dog with you. It definitely helps. Go to parks. Definitely helps.
Australian Shepherd, highly recommend. That was my dog, and he'll keep you active. Like it was a very active dog, so it'll also keep you in shape, which is good.
Yeah.
And so so I'm having to kind of clean out the filters and do stuff as I'm making coffee for like 20 people. And so we're like talking, and so
I'm
later on we go
listening.
on
I
a
just
hike.
got to shut my door, but I'm listening.
No, you're good. So later on we go on a hike. It's about a 2 hour hike, and I'm hanging out with some people. I just remember thinking like whatever they're saying, like this is a boring conversation. I don't know what they're talking about, but it's boring me. And she's in front of me again, and so I was like, you know what? We had a good time talking while I was making coffee. Like it's not going to hurt to keep talking to her more. So we start talking, and for the next 2 hours, we just talked the entire time. It was crazy. Like it was just effortless. It felt like just very easy. And I've never had too many moments in my life where I've felt like a nudge from God or like God's voice or anything. But after the hike, we're kind of winding down. Like everyone's like, we're kind of finishing up this like young adults camping trip. And I just remember at one point throwing some trash away, and she's standing in front of me again. And I just remember feeling like a nudge or a voice from God or something, just pursue her. Now before like high school Matt, college Matt, like all these things, like I was very you know, hopeless romantic, like nerdy type person when it came to that. Like if like, 2 weeks ago, like this, or 3 weeks ago, I guess technically, no, 2 weeks ago, this girl breaks up with me. I'm like, I would have been like heartbroken, like just, wallowing, like the self pity, all that stuff, like woes me. But I just remember like, okay, like I pray that I'm gonna trust God. If I'm gonna trust him, I have to trust him.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, like, maybe I'll pursue this girl then. Let's see what happens. Long story short, we're married, we have a kiddo, and it was just again like the funniest thing. It's just like every time, like again, like, and I think that's what's been cool too about like I think my testimony is I don't just focus on the points where I prayed for something and I got it. So like yes, in this particular case, I got married, but previously though in this other relationship, like he didn't show up in the way I thought he would because
Yeah.
I'm doing all the same things though with this other girl. Like I'm, A, B, and C. Like I'm praying about it before every date. I'm praying. Like I'm going to church. I'm still trying to focus on him, not like focus on her, not put my identity in her, keep my identity in Christ. I'm trying to do all the Christian things still, but it worked out this time. But it didn't work out before, even though I was doing the exact same thing. And I realized it's like, okay, because ultimately I'm not trusting in her or the relationship or my identity in these things. I'm trusting in him and my identity in Christ. And it was just like a really beautiful picture of him helping me learn to start trusting him. It's like, listen, like, I've shown up here in this bigger thing that you were worried about. I've shown up here in this more personal, like the DUI thing. I've shown up here in this more personal thing when it comes to like relationships and marriage. Like, and it's been these beautiful pictures. So that became kind of like my second Ebenezer of like, I didn't get what I want, even though I was doing what I was supposed to, but I still trusted him. And then eventually, I kind of did get what I wanted in terms of the marriage and kid and all that good stuff. But in the midst of that, between those two moments, it was like, I'm going to trust my trust and faith didn't waver. And so I was able to build this other Ebenezer of just remembering, okay, God, like even when I don't get what I want, you're still with me. And
Yeah.
even if you do show up later, it's not because anything I did. It's because you're a trustworthy God. And it's just been like a beautiful picture of just his mercy and love in my life.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, dude. It's like that process of trusting is difficult, but it's so much better, man, when we just trust the process, trust where he's leading us. And it takes like a degree of stress off our shoulders, to be honest. It's just much more enjoyable to trust God. So there's been like a string of break-ins in my neighborhood, and my wife is like all panicked, and she's like, "What if they break into our house?" Like she's freaking out. I'm like, she's like, "You're not worried?" I was like, "No, I'm not worried. Why would I be worried? I know who my God is. Like, I'm not
Hmm.
worried. I'm gonna sleep like a baby tonight.
Yeah,
And if he does break in, well, I got my gun. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm also really not worried.
He's equipped us in the way to
Yeah.
prepare to do those things to protect our families.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so it's been cool. So like he's showing up. I get to build my first Ebenezer. I get to build the second Ebenezer, and then um, in 2022, I get like the roughest year of my life. Like I can easily say that's like been like the worst year of my life. So in February, my mom eventually passes from cancer,
I'm
and it's
sorry to
kind
hear
of
that,
like
man. That's
a little
awful.
bit more like sudden. And thank you for that. But and I remember like it was one of those moments where I kind of like I remember talking to her like a few hours before she would eventually pass, and I just remember hanging up with her and was like something just felt really off. Not because of anything she was saying, there was just a feeling I had. And then my uncle would call me 2 hours later, letting me know that she had passed, and uh, and it was just like obviously with cancer, it's a little bit you kind of know it's coming at some point, the whole time. And there was a point earlier, maybe like a few years prior, but I was driving back from like a road trip and listening to a sermon, and it kind of hit me like when I'm praying for healing for my mom, that's either I want the healing on this side of heaven, but that healing can come on the other side
Yeah.
because I know where she is. She was a woman of faith. I know where she is. That she's healed now. Like her body isn't in pain anymore. She doesn't have to deal with this illness anymore, and she is healed. And so it was just like a weird like a few years prior, but it still doesn't ever prepare you as much when you actually lose a
Yeah.
parent, even if you know it's coming. And so obviously, like I'm distraught. I don't eat like for 24 hours. And I'm not like not my faith isn't shaken. Like I've seen enough the last like 5 6 years at this point to see what God's done in my life, and especially when I think back, like the doctors gave her a year to live, and here she is 10 years later. She got to see me actually progress in my career to a point where like I'm doing really well. She got to see me get married. She like as soon as she met my wife, she fell in love. Like no girl I ever brought home was she ever excited about, but she was like, if you don't marry this girl, you're dumb, you're wrong, you're missing out. um, she got to see me do those things. The only thing I didn't really get to give her because I was, disobedient in my younger years was the grandkids right away.
Yeah.
That's like kind of hurts the most. But I was like, man, God gave her like 10x
Yeah.
what anyone else on this plane thought that she would get, and that 10x was like a really meaningful 10x too, in the events that she got to participate in her own life, but even in the stuff I got to do in my life. And so it was hard. Like, I mean, losing a parent's never easy. I remember like going to my pastor and it's like, listen, like I'm not like worried about my faith. I'm not like gonna walk away. I'm not gonna fall away. But I need you to help remind me like this is real. And he talked about like when Jesus goes to visit Lazarus at the tomb, and he has this guttural. It's more of a guttural yell, as he explained it. It's not just like he cried because obviously he knows he's
Yeah.
going to raise Lazarus. It's more because he knows it's not part of the plan. This isn't what it's supposed to be like. But because he's like, but your mom's also like, Christian. She's saved. We know where she is. We know that
Yeah.
she is healed. Kind of stuff I already said earlier. And you talk about having this community, having the right people around you. Over that time since moving here, I had been building this great community of like brothers of my wife and her family, of people at work, and it's just like I've never had in even the neighborhood we're in. Like we're like surrounded by believers just by His providence, right? Like we moved into this neighborhood, this house that we bought, and it's just His providence surrounding us with other great Christians. And so one evening within that first week of her passing, I'm sitting on my couch. I'm like, God, like I know I'm not like I've seen you show up. I know all these things are true, but I need some way. Like I just need something else. I need something to help me just know that somehow this is real. And so later that day, or the next day, my father-in-law and I are in the driveway. We're doing some work on the yard. I'm just doing some things to take my mind off stuff. And our neighbor comes over. He's like, "Hey man, I just want to let you know that there's like 400 dudes praying for you." And I just remember like I almost like
Wow.
fell over. it was just such a spiritual like whirlwind of just knowing that there's like 400 dudes praying for you in like your lowest moment. And it was just like, okay, this is real. And so kind of like what I was saying earlier, there's no way this is going to turn around. There's no like, oh, you're going to get another mom, or she's going to come back somehow, right? Like this is the end. Like I didn't get what I wanted in the way I was praying for the last 10 years. But even in the tragedy, God still was there. Like he surrounded, he had given me a good wife who knew how to take care of me in those moments.
Yeah.
He had given me good brothers who knew how to be there and support me in the way I needed. I had this extended family. My birthday is like a few days later or a few weeks later from when she passed. We had this like brothers ski trip planned. My wife's dad and his brothers, and now their sons and then son-in-laws. They do a big ski trip. And I remember I'm seeing that on my birthday, my first birthday without my mom. This big table, like there's I want to say 10, 12 of us at this table of just these awesome Christian dudes, like guys that are like fatherly age, like in their 60s, like very successful. All these other guys like around my age and a little bit younger, like either like starting their careers or like on the right path for their careers, and they're all just really grounded in Christ. And it was just like this moment where I'm realizing everything that my mom had prayed for in my life and all the things that I had, lacked right on paper. I didn't have a dad. I didn't have any like, blood brothers. I didn't have, the same community that I have now that my mom was like trying to build. And here I am. And even in death, the prayers that she had over my life, I'm at this table because she had been praying over me. I remember kind of
Hmm.
going back a little bit to when I got fired and we were at, and I moved and all that had changed. I was talking with her. I had come back down to visit her, and had gone to church. We had gone to lunch afterwards, and I was like, and I forget exactly what the sermon was about, but I was talking about how like prayer is important, and I was like, why did God like change my life when I wasn't praying about any of this stuff? Like I wasn't praying to get fired. I wasn't praying for new friends or a new job or any of these things. And I remember her saying like, who says I wasn't praying? And it just hit me how much praying for other people is important.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here at this table on my birthday without my mom, surrounded by these like awesome godly dudes, like completely unworthy. Like if again, if you look at all the paper material stuff about who these people I'm sitting at the table with are, it's like how does a poor like Hispanic kid end up at a table like this with these great dudes and like where they come from, and not just like somehow we're like randomly connected, but like this is my new family in a lot of ways. And it was everything my mom prayed for. And so even like in the tragedy of something that there's no other way around it, right? Like even with the wife Ebenezer that we kind of talked about, I didn't get this one girl I thought I was gonna get, but he provided like someone else that is exactly who I needed. There's no other outcome, right? She's not coming back. I can't introduce her to her grandkid. I can't do the things that I wish I could do with her now. All the conversations or the movies or the things we would talk about now I can't. And but even in that loss, even in this like heartbreaking loss, like he was still showing up and through like the people he surrounded me with, through these people that are praying for me, through these people that I can see like my mom's prayers answered over my life. And it was just like really beautiful to see that even
It's
in those when you
it
don't get the things you want, right?
it's cool to see how too he played like this long game. He extended her life long enough for you to build this community of people, and have that support system that you would ultimately need to kind of help you get through this season of your life where you're now without your mother. It's beautiful, man.
And I wish I stopped there, but like I'll kind of fast forward through this just to kind of build off that point you said. Like he kind of plays, he's like I like the tapestry example. Like sometimes you see the back of a tapestry and it looks all messy, like the yarns everywhere, strings everywhere. But then you like flip it around, you see the front. It's like this beautiful picture. So later that year, the reason I say it's the worst year of my life, not just because I lost my mom. A few months later, we find out we're pregnant, and it's like circle of life. Like, oh, this is a huge blessing. Like even though my mom's gone, like new life comes, and it's just like really exciting. It's the middle of the summer and we're at a baseball game, and all of a sudden my wife was like really complaining about like cramps and pain, and we come to discover it was a miscarriage, and that's just hard. It's just like it feels like a sucker punch, right? It's like kind of like what the heck, God? Like you do this one thing, like okay, I kind of get it. I was it's on the it wasn't unforeseeable. What's going on? Why? And like one of the things I kind of like try to do is like I don't like obviously we can wrestle with God. That's where Israel comes from. That's what Jacob does. But ultimately, Jacob loses. Ultimately, we have to have the humility to trust in who God is. Remember saying, like, I'm not going to question you though. Like you've shown that you're trustworthy, not just in your word, but in my own life.
Yeah.
But that was a hard moment to not want to question. It's like, what's going on, God? Why? Like, I don't ever want to ask him that question anymore. But that was like the closest I got to doing it again. And it was rough again, like, but had that same support network was there. But like fear really kind of gripped me in that year of just like, death and dying, and I realized that there were still areas of my life that I hadn't completely turned over to him. And so ultimately, I just like by the end of the year, early going into the new year, it's like, you know what, God, like you've shown yourself faithful in every other area of my life. From things that I put myself into, from relationships, both like romantic and even just like brotherly stuff, to the community you give me, to the financial stuff, like having like 2 degrees, like having an undergrad and a master's. Like I had a ton of student debt, but I was able to get to a company and be part of an IPO where I paid all that off,
That's awesome.
which was like all his provision, and then again, like I said, that moment in time where I'm like, I'm gonna in 3 months, I'm gonna have $0 in my bank account. What am I gonna do? To now, like I have more money than I've ever, thought possible, especially once I left engineering. It was like, okay, God, like I do trust you with my life because ultimately I'm not in charge of taking care of my wife or my kid, or like being the steward of things you put me in charge of. All that is still yours. I'm just a steward, you know. And it was another really cool moment where it's like, again, I didn't get what I wanted in that time frame of like immediate uh, reconciliation to some of these ideas. It took a few months, like it took almost like over like 7 or 8 months, but it was like a beautiful journey he took me on to be okay. I do trust you with like literally every part of my life,
Yeah.
and then thankfully we were able to have, like I said, we do have a kiddo now, and one of the beautiful things to the point that made me think of this to kind of help maybe wrap some of this up is you kind of said he plays this long story, this long game, and I was really, I was going to be happy with whatever kid we had, but we had a son, and there was one moment maybe when he was like 2 or 3 months old, and I remember I got home from work and I was just playing with him, and he's like still like a little baby, and I'm around the floor, and I was like, I don't know how my dad ever did it. I don't know how he just left because there's nothing in me that would ever like leave him willingly. At least I'll say
Yeah.
that. It's kind of like if I leave, I'm either getting called home or I'm, putting my life down for him, like, a good father would. I just remember seeing him and just thinking, like, golly, like, what a redemptive journey God's like put me on, and just his mercy and grace, and be able to be able to give him, my son, what I didn't get to have because my mom was faithful, because she prayed over me. And that's kind of what I want to do for him, what I've been doing for him. And it's been great to have the community, the wife, like we were talking a little bit earlier. Um, I'm surrounded, like he's surrounded by a bunch of like like his best friend as a little baby is like my best friend. His kid is 2 months older than him. We
Yeah.
have another
That's
good
awesome.
close friend who's like 2 months younger than him, and he's got a great group of like kids he's going to be able to grow up around. And it's just like really beautiful to see God's provision in that. And so even in those things where I didn't get what I wanted in the exact way I wanted or the exact timing I wanted, he's always been faithful. And so I've been able to, like I said, like build these Ebenezer's from this like, getting delivered from this DUI thing, from being able to have like, trusting him with relationships, and then actually seeing the fruit of that, even in death, being able to see him show up and the things that my mom prayed for and the things that he provided me in that season, and even through a miscarriage, and then ultimately to having a kiddo, seeing him provide even just like a resolution to part of my story of like being fatherless, and being able to give him, my son, that to break that cycle. And so kind of like it was really, I love that you kind of invited me on to kind of talk about this, because especially considering how we started talking, and that's why I think I have such an aversion to the red pill mentality, to the concepts, to the manosphere at large, because even when people try to say it's compatible with Christianity, it's like it's really not. It's a materialistic worldview
Yeah.
that seeks to blame and victimize the people that subscribe to it, and it's like I could have easily fallen into that. But when you actually hold on to real Christianity, when you like around like actually, real Christian men, you get to see that provision in your life, even in the hard times, even when you don't get what you want and there's no way to get it right. There's no way my mom's coming back. I'm not, that prayer's not going to be answered on this side of heaven, but I know she's healed, but he still provided for me. And so I'm just grateful, to be able to share that, part of my story, part of what goes on in my life, through the things that I caused myself, through the things I had to trust him through, and even the things I didn't get. He's always been faithful in the midst of all those things.
It's encouraging to me to hear your story, man, and see you kind of breaking that cycle of fatherlessness too, because that is something that I think like I saw a lot in my generation, like my friends growing up without their dads and now seeing them become fathers and breaking that cycle is just a good thing where we're starting to build up, a new generation of God-fearing kids, that have their parents together, their families together, and have that sense of grounding that they need to ultimately become the people that God created them to be. It's awesome, man. So it's cool to see God work through you in that way, man, and help you kind of get to the other side of it. It's awesome.
And I think a big part of it is just having that humility because it's hard. I've always been, you know, relatively smart. Like I said, I got into a good university. I have an engineering degree. I have a master's degree. I've always been, very athletic. I've always been like a starter varsity player. I have a lot of reasons to be proud. And I've never been overly proud or prideful, but like when you have to like start trusting God, you realize how much pride you actually do have in your heart. I always
Yeah.
remember my pastor uh, got a group of guys together to do this like kind of Bible study with him, kind of this pilot program for some like men brotherhood stuff, and I was one of the guys he tapped on, and we had to like kind of go through the seven deadly sins, and it's like which of the seven deadly sins like would you say apply to you? And I remember seeing there, all these guys were like sharing, like, whatever they were sharing about. And I'm saying that's like, I don't know if any of these apply to me. And I'm like thinking the whole time, it's like, no, I feel like I really trust God. I love God. Like, I trust him. Like I show up to church. I'm doing what I'm supposed to. I don't think any of these apply to me. And then it was just like a ton of bricks all of a sudden it hit me. It's like, oh, pride. That's what it is. And I think that's the thing a lot of people don't realize is you really do have to lay down your pride because again, ultimately I'm not, God gives us authority. God calls us to be leaders in all these things and various aspects of life, especially as men. I believe that. But at the end of the day, like he says, like the word says, all authority is chosen through him. So ultimately, they're not really the true authority. God's the ultimate authority. I'm just a steward. I'm a steward over my life, over the body he's given me, over the people I'm in charge of at work, over the people that I care for in my community, over my friend group. Whatever's I steward all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily in charge of it. It's ultimately he is who is in charge of it. It's ultimately him that's guiding that and leading that he's called me in to participate with, and thankfully I've said yes, and he's rewarded me for that, and I know more importantly I'm rewarded on the other side as well.
Yeah, man. So I guess as we wrap up, man, what would be like one final thing you'd want, the people listening to take away from this?
I think especially my heart's always been for young guys and wanting them to succeed, and again that's why I just have such an aversion to the red pill, and honestly it's that there's obviously a lot of problems in the world. There's all these issues, especially if you're too online, it can get caught up in. But as bad as the world really is, it's also not that bad in reality too. Like again, like there's war and chaos, all the political stuff, the trans things, whatever political topic you can think of is out there. Yes, but when I look at my everyday life, when I look at what I get to do week in, week out, I'm a first responder as well. The people I get to serve and even the stuff that they go through is not it's not as crazy as the news always makes it out to be. So for young guys, especially, I would say, especially if you're single, just build brotherhood. The relationships will come. The women, whoever God has for you or not, like that'll come in its time. But the thing that's most important that really put me on the right path was brotherhood, having especially godly brothers, guys that truly understand the word, that actually truly seek after God, that seek to be humble and trust in Him. And then the other big thing I would say in conjunction with that is mentorship. Like one of the things I had in our small group was there was always an older adult married couple. So the wife would help with the women. They would do like a special like side time so they could talk about more girl things and we could talk about more guy things with the guy. And our mentor couple guy was actually the one that helped marry us. He and his wife
That's
were our
awesome.
premarital counselors. He was one that was officiant at our wedding, and without mentorship, I don't think I would have had the wisdom or tools to actually like pursue dating well, ultimately marriage. And so, brotherhood and mentorship, man, that's the biggest thing. So it's obviously not just for men; women could use it too. But I kind of speak more so towards guys in that sense.
Yeah, man. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Mentorship is important. Brotherhood is important. All these things are important parts of what it means to become a man and to navigate the craziness in this life. So, yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. Where can people find you?
Mostly on X, Pomps, and I'm sure you can follow from here.
Yep.
But I'm there, hopefully trying to do something positive.
Yeah,
But
man.
yeah, appreciate the time and just be able to again ultimately just share what God's done in my life, and hopefully just people hear the truth of the gospel. But definitely obviously read the Bible, dive into the Word yourself, confirm all these things. It's not just about what I say, but it's ultimately what God's Word says.
Yeah. Amen, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys. I hope you have a blessed night. Deuces.